We are celebrating successfully developing and implementing pedagogy that prepares students to be college and career ready. How has the one-to-one resource affected the way you design instruction?
One-to-one has completely transformed the way that I design my lessons as well as the way that I deliver my lessons. The nice thing about having that one-to-one technology is that I'm able to differentiate my curriculum for each individual student. So I can provide, using Haiku and the iPad, I can provide materials, I can gather resources, and I can put them all out there for the students. Students can choose to work on materials that are at their level. I can kind of guide them into what they should be working on. I can help them and assist them along the way. I can also post enrichment projects up there so that students who have already mastered the current objectives and the current curriculum are able to move on to something that's a little more challenging for them so that they're never bored, they're never sitting in a classroom having already mastered what we're currently working on. This process also allows me to spend more time with students who really need my help and need help mastering some of those objectives. And so it really kind of works well because I'm there as a resource and I can help every student no matter where they're at within the curriculum.
How has the shift in pedagogy helped students enhance their independence by becoming self-directed learners, effectively seeking out and using resources?
One of the best parts of the one-to-one is it allows for more natural differentiation within the classroom, in that when I provide materials to students, there are many opportunities for those lessons to be self-paced, resulting in more personalized learning for the student. So they're able to work through at their own speed, at their own pace. If they know it or if they're familiar with it, they can move more quickly. If they need more help, they can take a little bit longer, do a little bit more work on their own, as well as using me as a resource to help them as well. This process puts kind of that job as the learner back on the student, and I feel one of the best parts of this program is we're really teaching them how to be learners, how to seek out materials, how to seek out resources, know when they need help, recognize when they're struggling, and recognize when they know it and they can move on. And I think that's one of the best things of this program is it really gives me the time in the classroom to help all of my students realize their true potential and recognize where they're going and how I can help them get there.
How have you maximized student learning through the use of quality feedback?
So recently my students completed a writing assignment and we used Google Docs for the assignment, and the kids were actually writing collaboratively in the Google Doc, and then I was able to give them feedback as they were writing, and then the kids were also able to give feedback to each other as they were working in the group and then writing it within the Google Doc.
How has the one-to-one resource enhanced your ability to differentiate your lessons within your classroom?
I really liked doing feedback this way because the students were able to change their writing in real time. So I feel in the past that students have gotten feedback from me, but mostly it's feedback on a final product. So I felt like they were more motivated with this feedback because they could actually go back, change their writing, improve their writing, and they knew that there would be a payoff to doing that. I also liked doing the feedback on the Google Doc because I felt like it allowed for differentiation naturally. For example, some of my students were really struggling with just writing a topic sentence or a concluding sentence, so I was able to go in and give them feedback that focused on that, where my other groups had wonderfully written paragraphs, so then we were able to focus on word choice and making sentences more complex and really adding on to their explanations of text support.
Traditionally, we've given feedback to students via pen and paper on drafts of their work. How has the one-to-one resource enhanced your ability to give quality, real-time feedback?
Because I'm able to give feedback immediately and in real time, not only does it help the students to adjust their writing, actually, as I was grading the paragraphs, it's some of the best writing that I've seen, but for me as a teacher, it also allowed me to adjust my feedback. For example, one of the groups that I was working with, I could tell that they just really weren't understanding one of the topics that they were writing about. So I actually stopped the whole class. We just had 2 minutes of reteaching, and then the students were able to get right back on track. Whereas before and in the past, if I was looking at a rough draft or a final copy, I would have realized that after the fact, and then we would have had to backtrack. But because of this, I was able to intervene right away and help them.
The traditional pattern of teaching has been to assign students to read textbooks and work on problems outside of school while listening to lectures and lessons in class. In a flipped classroom, the students first study the topic by themselves using video lessons prepared by the teacher. In class, students apply the knowledge in an environment where the teacher can support application of the skill.
So the math department in sixth grade is really working on finding iPad apps that both deepen and extend the math learning that takes place in our classrooms. We don't want to use it just for the sake of using it, but we want to use it in a really meaningful way. One of the ways we can do that is to make a more efficient classroom and really spend our time with the analyzing mathematics. So we decided to create a flipped classroom and to teach the Desmos application that we found. This is a graphing app. And rather than anytime kids are learning a new app that requires lots of playing with buttons and things like that, it's very time consuming and it's not a good use of classroom time. So I created a TouchCast where I had the Desmos app behind me, my face was on the screen, and I was describing to kids one step by one step how to use the Desmos app. I was able to point out on the screen where everything exists, and then after they watched this, they had an assignment, which was to graph data they had collected in class that day. It was exercise data. And so that way they could spend as long as they needed to playing with the app, finding all the different ways to control and make changes and label the axes and scale the axes and all those kinds of things, and then come into class ready to analyze the data. That worked fabulously because the next day the kids came in, we would put up 4 graphs up on the board using AirPlay, and we had a fabulous conversation from minute 1 in that classroom about what all of the different graphs meant, why we were seeing different things in different graphs, what might change how the graph appeared. I mean, the conversation was amazingly rich and deep. We've since been able to use the Desmos app in a similar way in the classroom, just in terms of taking data. Yes, they have to be able to make a graph by hand. Once I've determined that they understand how to do that properly, we can take data and put it in graph form and within minutes be able to jump right into the deep discussion that makes it such an exciting classroom.
Prior to the one-to-one resource, students have used graphing calculators to analyze data. Class time was needed to teach students how to use the calculator as a graphing tool. Do you think the flipped classroom improves classroom efficiency and student engagement?
Unquestionably, yes. First of all, the app is much more user-friendly. I've used graphing calculators. It's much more user-friendly. In addition to which, kids are able to project their work up onto the smartboard. Again, we can get several kids up there at the same time. We can have just one student's work. It's seamless. I'll say, okay, you 3 beam in, get your, AirPlay your graph up onto the board, and we'll have that discussion. Then we'll look at a couple more, and we'll look at a couple more, and kids are excited because it's their own data. We're having rich conversations about it, and it's just it's seamless, and we're going right to the heart of the mathematics. We're able to have conversations that we maybe would have never even gotten to had we not been able to display more than one graph up on the smartboard at the same time. I mean, it was beautiful. It worked wonderfully.
The TouchCast lesson could have been viewed from any device at home. How was this strategy enhanced because of the one-to-one technology?
They have their own device. So when they're at home, they watch the TouchCast, they're playing with it, they don't have to find time on a parent's computer or another computer in the home. They have that device which they then bring back into the classroom, and the very night after we're just done discussing the previous night's homework, and again, they're able to project their work up onto the smartboard, which they wouldn't be able to do without their own iPad. And then we're able to morph directly into the next application or the next activity, which builds on what we have just done. And they have that device right then and there. They're seamless. They have it done in 2 minutes because they learned how to do it the night before. It just keeps the flow going so beautifully, which with graphing calculators or computers at home, it would absolutely, or having to get an iPad off the iPad cart, they can actually save their Desmos graph and they can screenshot it, and they have a whole set of screenshots. They can bring that into their homework. They can screenshot it, bring that into their homework, which maybe they've done on Notability, and everything's together, and it just provides such a nice foundation to have the fabulous discussions in deep learning.
True formative assessment allows a teacher to gather information on student progress towards learning and adjust instruction if needed. How has one-to-one technology enhanced formative assessment?
During our India unit, I had students participate in an online discussion board through Haiku using their iPads, in which they were to discuss the costs and benefits of the caste system, the social structure in India at the time. I was monitoring the discussion boards from home in the evening when it became pretty apparent that they just were not getting it. And they weren't addressing the essential question that I had set out for them to address. That was my learning goal. So we were able the next day in class to revisit that entire scenario and talk about the costs and benefits of the caste system as a whole. If I had not seen that discussion board or seen their interactions with each other, I probably would have assumed that they were where I wanted them to be, and I would not have revisited the topic in any way. But it really gave me an opportunity to do that and enhance my instruction by revisiting the lesson.
Collaborating with peers and constructively evaluating others can be difficult for middle school students. How has the one-to-one resource helped students who struggle with this?
I actually printed several transcripts to bring to various student IEP meetings because I do have some students that really struggle with social interactions with their peers in the classroom. But what I actually saw through these online discussion boards was they really blossomed and they were interacting with their peers in an appropriate and confident way. And for students that I rarely hear from or students that struggle with group work, this was kind of one of those light bulb moments where I realized that this was a new format for them to actually get their voices heard, and then another opportunity for me to assess them as well.
We do current events every day in class, and students will come up in front of the class and present it, and oftentimes following their presentation, kids will have other questions. And sometimes the events can be local or international, or this time it happened to be a national event in Washington, D.C., and it was involving the election just a couple of months ago. In the past, it would be one of those, well, why don't you guys look that up at home? But in this case, they had all their iPads with them, and we were quickly able to gather, in this case, it was election results. And we could see on the iPad through the internet the different data from the different regions and how they voted Democratic or Republican. And as a class, it generated some more interest in politics, which for sixth grade kids is tough to get. But for that class, they were actively engaged. And for all my other classes, I kind of went back too because I wanted to make that a teachable moment. In the past, that was something they go home and 9 out of 10 times they don't come back the next day, so there's no follow-up. But in that case, it was immediate, it was engaging, and it was really positive.
How would the teachable moment have been different if the students didn't have their own devices?
I didn't have the cart and I didn't have them right there and then. I'd have to go get the cart, and to be honest, I wouldn't go get the cart because in that period, which goes by as quickly as it is, I would never have been able to have done that. But now they're on their desk or they're underneath their desk. For them to get that, and they're so quick getting through all these apps, they're so proficient. It was something that was a smoothest transition into it, and then even a smoothest transition out into the rest of our day.
With the implementation of a K-8 Spanish program, it's important to track student progress in all the domains of language learning. How can the one-to-one resource enhance this ability?
Well, with the iPads, we would be able to implement e-portfolios, which would track their growth, and students would be able to reflect and self-evaluate themselves as they continue through the K-8 program and see how much they've grown from the very beginning, which is very important in learning a language to be able to measure one's growth and for the teachers to also see that growth as well.
For years, teachers have used portfolios in a pen and paper format to collect artifacts on student learning. How does every child having a device improve the quality and the usefulness of the portfolio?
I think that while there is a place for paper and pencil, I think that the e-portfolio would definitely allow for more student choice. I think that it doesn't have to be on this day and this time and this piece of work. It's when they're ready to record and when they feel that they have work they would like to save and look back on in the future. So I think that it gives students more freedom.
What type of evidences for learning would students be able to include in an electronic portfolio?
especially in measuring your oral skills. As far as paper and pencil go, that's very difficult to evaluate. Written skills, you can definitely do that with paper and pencil, but in demonstrating your oral skills through the iPads, there are many different avenues that you could take, and you can do interpersonal, presentational, and really see their growth as they continue through the K-8 program.
When students frequently collaborate with peers, they learn to appreciate and value a collaborative environment by actively seeking to understand perspectives, communicate effectively, and evaluate points of view. How has the one-to-one resource fostered collaboration in your classroom?
A lot of the things that we're currently using are Google Docs and Google Sheets. Google Docs allows students to interact with each other as they're writing papers and doing project work. We can set up a template for students to fill in, and as they work on that together, it really allows them that interactive collaboration. With Google Sheets, students are able to collect data from scientific experiments in class, and one of my goals is to have the students not only sharing within their table, but sharing collaboratively with all of the lab groups that we have in one class, and possibly even across classes, so that as students start to recognize more and more data, they will be able to analyze and project and draw some very serious conclusions over a mass amount of data like a true scientist would do. And so I'm hoping to incorporate that in my classroom as the year goes on.
How has student-to-teacher collaboration changed in your classroom?
The really nice part, again, going back to the Google Docs feature, is that teachers can actually jump into the students' documents, writing assignments. I've had the kids doing paper earlier this year, and we were able to discuss the progress of the student as they were working on their paper. So as a teacher, I'm able to comment on their work, and they can reply to my comments and make changes and edits before they turn in a final assignment.
Notability is a note-taking app that allows students to type, write, or draw their notes. They also can electronically organize their notes in a way that makes sense to them as a learner. How has the use of Notability improved classroom efficiency and enhanced student learning?
I feel that Notability has had a positive impact in my classroom. Students use Notability to take notes in class. A lot of things that were paper-based are now used on Notability. Notability is really easy for the students to use. They can manipulate the text, they can white things out, they can write right on there, and so it's a lot easier for them to use. The other part that I like as a teacher is a lot of times students go home and they forget their homework at school, they forget their binders at school, and Notability is not only an app, but it's also web-based, so if they do forget a homework assignment that's already on Notability, they're able to easily access it.
So do you think that you're gaining instructional time because there's less time for searching for items?
Definitely. I have more, their transitions are a lot smoother, and there's a lot more instructional time used because they don't have to go looking for their binders that are overflowing sometimes, or in the past years with papers, or their backpacks or their lockers. So it's a lot easier for them to use. They know where everything is. In my class, we've created folders for the different types of things that we use. So for example, in Notability, they have a grammar section, a writing section, a reading section, and so everything goes there, and it helps with organization. Notability, I feel, is a great organizational tool for students.